everyone, my name is Giovanna Proença, and today we're going to talk about Project 3 Mail of CS50 web programming with Python and JavaScript. So basically in this project, we're going to build a front-end for an email client that makes APIs calls to send and receive emails. Basically, we're going to clone something like Gmail, alright? If you would like to have full support from programming experts, check the description below, okay? And I would like to emphasize that this video solution is made for those who have already completed the assignment and want to have an alternative view about the problem. We totally discourage plagiarism. So basically, if you already downloaded the project, you're going to see that you have some files, alright? We're going to see some of these files in here. Remember to do the make migrations mail and then migrate. They kind of explain you to do this before you start. And I already ran here the Python 3 manage.py run server, okay? So what we're seeing here, we already have the login page, okay? They already create here all the backends, so we're just going to focus on creating the front end. But instead of doing what we were doing before using HTML and CSS, we're going to use JavaScript. So basically we only have one HTML file, okay, where we have two divs. We have the emails view and the compose view. What are these views? Basically, we're going to add things inside of them, and then this is going to show up in the page, all right? We're not going to create multiple files, HTML files. We're going to add components using JavaScript in our inbox.html, okay? So let's register here first and see what we have in our hands. So I'm going to create here a fake email, okay, with, I don't want a strong password. I want a regular password here, okay? And I'm registering. Great. Now, this is our inbox.html, okay? Basically, we have here the buttons for each page. So once we click, it's going to render some different things. So basically, we are able to see all the boxes we have here in our email, okay? And we're going to build them right now. So basically, the emails view, it's everything we can see in the inbox, in the sent, and in the archive. The compose view is this part in here, in this div, okay, that we're seeing that we have the from, choose subject, the body, and the button choose send, okay? And the logout, we don't need to use it because it's already implemented. So like I mentioned, we already have the backend made for us. So we have our models, and basically in our models, we have the email. So here in the models, we're saying that how an email is made. So how can we create an email? An email needs the user, the sender, the recipient, the subject, body, timestamp, if it was read or not, and if it's archived or not. So the read and archived, they are Boolean fields, okay? And this is pretty much what we have. We also have the user here that it's allowing us to have the email and the password, okay? Besides that, we already have the URLs that we're gonna work. So basically they already create a URL for login, logout, and register. And for the API calls we're gonna do during this problem. It's really nice because we're gonna start learning how can we work with APIs, how can we work with JavaScript, and this is kind of how it's gonna work in React. So it's pretty nice to start learning in here, okay? And like I mentioned, we already have the backend, so here we already have the functions we're gonna use. I'm not gonna say into details right now, but once we're doing the calls, the API calls to here, we're gonna see in more details, okay? So now let's start our first task. So in the first task, they're telling us to handle the send mail. So when the user submits the email composition form, so we're going to work in here. Once the user click here to send the email, we're going to actually send the email for our user, okay? So we're likely to use the post request to emails, and we want to pass the recipient, subject, and body. So we need to send this data. And once the email has been sent, we want to load the sent mailbox. So basically now we're going to handle the idea of sending a new email, and once we send, we're going to display this page in here, all right? So let's start seeing what we have in our inbox.js, because this will be the main file we're going to work with. Basically in the inbox.js we have the main file, the main function, okay? That is the DOM content loaded event listener. So what is the DOM content loaded? Basically we're going to wait our HTML file to load, and then we're going to start loading our JavaScript file, okay? Otherwise we might have some issues. Then we have here these add event listeners for each button. So basically we're creating the logic of once we click in this button, we're going to this mailbox. Once we click in the compose, we're going to the compose, okay? And by default we're going to load the inbox, okay? This is what we have. Then we have the compose email. So the compose email is doing what? Basically we have here, we are saying display none for the emails view, so we don't want to show this div, but we're saying that we want to display block for the compose. So we're telling that we want to display only this div of our HTML file. And this is going to be important in the future, and you're going to see it. Then here we are setting all the values for true for the recipient, subject, and body as empty. We're clearing the field. And that's pretty much what we have in our compose email. And now let's see what we have in our load mailbox. Basically the load mailbox is expecting a variable. So here here we're going to receive inbox, compose, sent, or archived. And basically what we want to do, we want to render, actually not compose, inbox, sent, or archive. Basically we're going to display the emails view and we're not going to display the form, okay? Because we're saying the form display none. And we're just displaying here the name of the box, okay? Now we're going to handle the idea of once we click the submit button, we want to send the email for someone. So what are we going to do? We're going to add an event listener here for the form, okay? So basically we need to get here when we submit the form, okay? So we're going to use this ID compose form because this is the identifier that we can use to know what is the component we want to grab from our HTML. So basically we're going to say here, I'm going to set submit handler, for example. Okay, and basically we're going to say document.query selector, all right? And what is document.query selector? I want to show you here the inspect, okay? And then we can see what is happening inside of our code. So how can we grab the form? We can use this document.query selector that it's from JavaScript. So here document.query selector, and this way we can grab exactly what we want, okay? Oops. So here we want to grab the compose form. All right, and let's see what is the compose form. So basically the compose form is everything we have, all of our form, and this is exactly what we want. Okay, so I'm gonna grab this and I'm gonna add an event listener of submit. So once we submit, so add event listener submit. Once we submit, I wanna call a function that I'm gonna create called send email. Okay, and that's pretty much what we have to do. To check if it's working, what are we gonna do? We're gonna create the function here, function send email. And I want to use add event, I'm going to do console.log to check if we're getting what we want. So here console.log, and here I'm going to say hi, for example. Okay, and let's see if this works. So if I refresh in here, great. And I go to compose, I can add multiple things in here. It doesn't matter. And when I click send, it's having something here, but we can barely see. And the problem is that we have to prevent default. So basically we use this event prevent default because basically if we don't use it, it's gonna happen exactly what happens right now. It's gonna load too fast and basically it doesn't know what to do. Okay, so let's try it again. If I go here to compose and I put here some random things just to check, and I click here send, we're gonna see here the console saying hi, because this is exactly what is going on. Once we click the submit button, we want to enter in this function. So far we're saying hi. Okay, now what are we gonna do? Now we can continue and we can start adding the things that we want. Basically we want to do a post request, right, where we're going to create a new email and we're going to send to the person. So basically we want to get first the recipient, subject, and body. And if we take a look in here in the inbox.html, we can grab the recipient because the ID of this input is compose recipients. We can get the subject by using this ID, and we can get the body by using this ID. So basically here we're going to do exactly what we did before. All right, so here we're going to do document.query selector. Okay, I'm going to use for the compose body because I want to show you something. So if I use compose body, I'm going to get the whole value in here, right? The whole content. But to get the specific, the letter G, what is the content, the text that we're writing, we have to use the property value, okay? And if I click enter, now we're seeing here G, okay? So this will be how we're going to get each property. Actually, I'm going to use this thing in here to help us, all right? And I'm going to paste in here. But here I'm going to store fields, okay? And I'm going to store these fields in a variable. So I'm going to remove this equals and empty here, okay? And I'm going to create a variable in front of it. So let me remove, and we're going to make a const recipient, okay? Then we're going to make a const subject, okay? Over here I'm going to put recipients, and then we're going to do a const body, okay? And that's pretty much what we need. Great. Now we need to send this data to our backend. So how are we going to do this? If you scroll up, we have here the post, I think it's this post emails. Do you see? Basically this post emails is telling us how we should do the call to send the data from our frontend to our backend. So we're going to use this copy and paste, and we're going to change with the things that we need. Basically we're saying I want to send the data to this URL emails. And what is this URL emails? Basically this URL emails, it's talking about which function? let me see here. Basically, we're sending, this is the URL, emails, so we're sending to our compose function, okay? And basically what is gonna happen in here, they're gonna get the data from our front end, and they're gonna create a new object in our database. So we're gonna start this email in our database in order to send for the new user, okay? And what we need for this call, we're saying that is a post method, and we're sending some things. That's why we use the body to send some data that we wanna send. So here we're sending the recipients, subject, and body. And you see here, we have the email for the recipient, we have the text for the subject, and we have the text for the body. After we do the fetch call, we need this then response.json, and basically this response is going to tell us if we were successful or not. And then we have a second .dem to do something with it if we want to do something. In our case, we want to redirect our code, our user, to the sent mailbox, and later we can work with the catch error, but we can see by the time. So basically here we're going to send data to backend. Okay, and we're gonna use this fetch call in here. We're gonna do some changes. So in here, instead of this email, we're gonna use our variable recipients. Okay, here instead of this subject, we're gonna use our variable subject. And here in body, we're gonna use our variable body. Okay, because this is the names that are here in the right are the names of the variables we're using, okay? Then we're gonna have this .then response JSON, and basically, like we can see here, it's gonna send email sent successfully, or it's gonna send a message saying that something went wrong. And once we have this done, we wanna redirect our page to our load mailbox, right? I'm gonna do console.log response, but I wanna also use the load mailbox here, and we wanna go to the sent mailbox. Okay, and let's see if it works. Remember, every time you're working here, you need to hard refresh your code, otherwise it might not get what you're doing. So remember to do Command-Shift-R or Control-Shift-R, okay? So now for the compose, I'm gonna send a message to leo@email.com, and I'm gonna say hi, and here, hi there. Okay, this is the message I wanna send. Once I click here, send, it's saying error, user with email leo@email.com does not exist. So this is good. This says that, so basically the result that we're seeing here, it's telling us that we couldn't send the email because thus the recipient does not exist. So let's create this recipient. I'm gonna register here, leo@email.com. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oops, I didn't add the second one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if I register, now we have Leo, and now I'm gonna send it to G. So if I do here, g@email.com, and I say hi there. Okay, now if I click send, now it's displaying email sent successfully. So this is good. This means that our call was working fine. And after we sent, we're now in the sent mailbox. So we did the first step of our specification. So now for the mailbox, we're going to create for the sent, the inbox, and the archive, how it's going to look like. So basically, they're telling us to do a get request where we're going to get all the emails about that particular user. And we're going to display in a nice way. We can use some cards to display. Then we need to make the logic of if the email was already red, we're going to display here, they're telling us. If it's unread, we're going to display in a white background color. If it's red, we're going to display in a gray background color. And finally, we're going to add an event listener that once we click in the button, we can view the email. And the view email will be the next part. So don't worry, we have a couple of things to do, but we're able to do this. So let's start with the get request. So if we take a look in here, we have an example of this get request. Okay, so basically here they're telling us that we can use this particular call. We're gonna say fetch emails inbox, and here it can be fetch emails inbox, send, or archive, okay? And this is going to return us all the emails for that particular user. And what is emails slash and a number of a page of a mailbox is this function here. We're sending the data to we're getting the data from this function. Basically in this function they are filtering by the user and if it's archived or not to check each mailbox we want to get the data. Okay, so we're gonna start implementing this fetch call. All right, we already have the function here, load mailbox, so it will be right after the inner HTML, okay? And here I'm gonna say get the emails for that mailbox and user, because we need to get from both. So we're gonna use this fetch method here. Here we're using inbox, right? But we can make this dynamic because it will depend on the mailbox we're gonna have. So you can use here the backticks instead of quotation mark. We're gonna use backticks. Okay, and here to display a variable, we're gonna use $, curly bracket, and inside of the curly bracket, we put the name of the variable. So here we're gonna say mailbox. Okay, so depending on the mailbox we're being redirected, we're gonna display that particular emails. Then we're gonna do a response.json, and we're gonna receive the email. So let's see what we have so far. Okay, I wanna show you in here. So if I hard refresh again, we're gonna see here in our inbox now we have an empty list, but in our sent, because Leo only sent emails, we have here a list with one dictionary. And what is the dictionary? The dictionary contains all the data about the email that Leo sent. So we have the archived, body, ID, read, recipients, sender, subject, and timestamp. And what is this? This is exactly what we have in our models.py. So basically we are receiving exactly the object we built for that particular email. Okay, this is pretty nice because we start understanding what is going on in our code, that how things are linked to each other. Okay, so this is good. We're receiving the email. Now we don't want to only console.log. We want to display these emails, the email in a box like we have in Gmail. Okay, so how are we going to do? If you scroll down, we have the hint part here, and they kind of tell us how can we handle how can we create a new div using JavaScript, okay? But before we do this, actually, we need to do a for each loop. We need to loop through all of the emails we have, all right? And for each particular email, we're gonna build a new div. So basically what we wanna do is this. For each particular, actually here it's just sending how it is the view email. But for each particular div, we wanna display, for each particular email, we wanna display a card, like we have in Gmail or any other email that you can think about. So for here, I'm gonna loop through emails and create a div for each. All right, and to do this, we're going to use the for each loop. So here we're going to say emails.forEach. Okay, and what we have to say? We have to say that now we're gonna give a name for what will be the variable that is gonna change in every iteration. And here I'm gonna say single email, okay? And then we're gonna do something in this single email. So what are we gonna do right now? Now we're gonna use this function here. We're gonna create a new element using create element div. Then we can add any content we want in this div, and we're gonna change in the future for something more dynamical. We can add this event listener for the function, and then we have to append this new div we made in our main container to make it appear, all right? So we're gonna use this hint that we have in our hands, all right? So I'm gonna put this in here. I'm gonna say create div for each email, okay? And here I'm gonna paste, great. So instead of element, I'm gonna change here to new email, okay? New email. I changed here, this should be create element, so create element. For the new email, inner.html. What is the inner.html? Basically, the inner.html is a function that allows us to write a text, okay? But I wanted to show what we have. So basically, this inner HTML is going to allow us to write some HTML content in JavaScript, so we can add some paragraph, H6, anything you want in here. And then we have this add event listener where we're creating the logic of clicking in the button. And then we need to append this new element, not in the container, but we need to append this new element in our emails view. Okay, so here we're gonna replace container with emails view. Okay, so let's see how it looks like. If I refresh in here and I go to the sent, now we can see here that we have the message. This is a content of the div, okay? I can change here, for example, if I send another email to G, testing, just testing, for example, and if I send it in here, we're gonna see that now we have two texts. This is exactly the text we have in the inner HTML. Okay, so now we're gonna start working a little bit with this. First, I wanna make this not displaying this as a content of the div, but I wanna display the email that we're working. So in order to make you see, I'm gonna do a console.log single email. Okay, so let's see what is single email. If I refresh again and I go to the sent, we can see that single email in each time is the email, it's a dictionary. So basically I want to display the recipient, the sender, and actually they kind of tell us what they want us to show, right? Basically in the mailbox they want us to show who the email is from, the subject line, and the timestamp of the email. So we're gonna do this, okay? We're gonna say here the sender, and we want to say the subject and the timestamp. Okay, so in here, instead of inner HTML, I'm gonna replace with what we're gonna use in here, okay? So in order to make in different lines, I'm gonna use backticks again. Okay, and this allows us to put in different lines. And I'm gonna write some HTML in here, so we're already familiar with HTML. I wanna add in here an H1, for example, saying, actually I'm gonna use an H5 saying sender. And here I wanna use the variable single email dot sender. Okay, and then I'm gonna close the H5. Right after, I wanna display a paragraph with the body, or H6. Actually, here I'm gonna change. This will be an H6. The sender I don't wanna make too big. I wanna make the text bigger. So here I'm gonna say subject. And here I'm gonna use single email dot subject. and I'm gonna close the H5. And finally, in a paragraph, I'm gonna put the timestamp. And for the timestamp, I just wanna use the variable, I don't wanna say timestamp. So here I'm gonna say single email dot timestamp. Okay, and it will probably a little bit messy, but we can see. So if I refresh and I go to send, now we see here sender, Leo, subject testing, and the timestamp, and we have for both cases, right? I'm gonna remove now the console. Actually, I'm gonna let it in here. Okay, that's fine. Now let's work a little bit with something. I want you to make, for example, if I click in here, you see for this email, it's appearing this message, this new email has been clicked. So basically we're saying that we added add event listener in this div. Okay, if I click in here, it will display the same message. So in the future, once we click, we're gonna view the details of this email. Okay, now basically we have the content in here, but now I want to work a little bit with the styling. So what are we gonna do? We're gonna use Bootstrap. You can use whatever you like, okay, but I want to use this class here from Bootstrap. CS50 already imported Bootstrap for us, so we don't need to worry about. How can I add the Bootstrap class in here? We're gonna use a property called class name. So here we're gonna say new email dot class name, and this will we can give the name that we like. So here I'm gonna use list group. Okay, and if I refresh and see the sent, now we have them in a box. Okay, so do you see we have them in a box for everything? All right, so far so good, things are working properly. Here I'm gonna change for actually I think it's fine. Now we need to handle changing the color if we already clicked or not. Okay, so what are we gonna do in here? So to make this, we need to check this variable here, red or not. This here, the red is equal to true. Here, red is equal to true as well. Okay. So we need to work with, if it's true here, we're gonna display in gray. All right. And if it's not true, if it's false, we're gonna display in white. Okay. So how are we gonna do this? We're gonna make here. You can do any part you like. I'm gonna do this in here. So here I'm gonna say change background color. Okay, and basically what I'm gonna say, I'm gonna create two classes here in my styles.css, and I'm gonna say in here dot red, and here I'm gonna say background color, and here we can say like gray. Actually gray will be too gray, so I'm gonna do df. All right, this is kind of a light gray. Okay, and on red I'm gonna say background color white. Okay, so I made these two styles in here. Now I'm gonna use the class name again. Okay, so I'm gonna do an if statement basically. There are two ways of doing if statement. There is the regular way that you already know, and we're gonna do in the future again. But there's a second way that I want to try it out with you. Okay, let me just here add click event to view email. So how are we gonna work in here? We're gonna say new email dot class name. And how are we gonna do this? We're gonna say equals, and we're gonna check if single email dot red. And what does this mean? If single email dot